Yay! Time for a maths lesson. Woo! Howdy! This lesson is on frequency tables and frequency polygons. It's a subject that appears GCSE at foundation and higher levels. Now, before I go on, you might want to pause the video and click on the link below the video. That's got the exam questions for this topic in, and you might want to have that on hand so that you can work through it with me as I'm going through it as well. Frequency polygons and tables then are just like all different types of charts. They're there to display information in a visual way, and that can help us extrapolate information quickly, get information quickly. It can also help us find key bits of information like trends, averages, all those different things. That's what charts and tables exist for, and that's what frequency polygons do too. Now, there are a few things that we need to know from other subjects in the GCSE that will help us with frequency tables and polygons. So let's have a look at just a couple of those right now. The first is this, averages. Hopefully you'll all remember your different types of averages, mean, median, and mode. Now, in frequency table questions, you could be asked for any of these based on the frequency table. So mean, add all the values together and divide by the number of values. So for example, if I was to add these numbers together, 6 add 6, 12 add 10, 22 add 11, 33 add 15, 48 add 20, 68. So I'd add them all together first and then divide by how many there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 68 divided by 6, and that's going to get me 11.3 recurring as an answer. So that would be mean. Mean is great for including all the data at the same level and coming up with the average number for all that data. Median then, the middle value, that's where we put all the numbers in order and find out which one's the middle. So you can see out of my 6 numbers, if I was to cross the outside off, then the next one, I'd end up with 2 in the middle here, 10 and 11, and I'd find the middle number between those two. I can either add those together and then divide by 2, so 10 plus 11 is 21, divide that by 2, I get 10.5, or I can just see what's in the middle. If they're right next to each other, it's quite easy to do as well. So median, the middle value, is really good at finding the average that's without having any extremes at either end. So for example, if this one was 200 instead of 20, that would really affect our mean because we'd be adding that in and then dividing that number as well. But in the median, even if this was 200 instead of 20, then that wouldn't actually change what our middle values are. They're still 10 and 11. So it's really good for finding out what's what the central number is, no matter how extreme it is on either end. This is used for calculating average incomes in households because it says, well, we know that there's millionaires in the world and billionaires in the world, but they're the extreme end. So the average wage income is based on who the person in the middle, what they're earning. Mode then, the most common value. Well, this is really useful for finding the average things that aren't numbers. So for example, the most common thing sold, for example, in a shop, that would be the mode. But also what occurs most often. Okay, so in our average list here, you can see that the 6s are the mode. So that's not a brilliant average for finding out the middle or the central number between them all, but it's good for finding out the most common. So average is one thing we need to know for frequency tables and polygons. The second thing we need to know is our inequality symbols. These, the crocodiles. Okay, so less than, more than, and if it's got a line underneath it, it means it can include that number as well, or equal to. So in this example I've got over here then, 40 is less than or equal to n, which is less than 50. So just remember, we just read from left to right. 40 is less than or equal to n, which is less than 50. What this means is that n is a number between 40 and 50. And it could include 40 because it's got the line underneath it. but it couldn't include 50. So any number between 40 and 50, including 40, could be in that range. So that's inequalities. Now, the reason that we need to know those is that in the GCSE exam questions, frequency tables often come with a question about working out the average based on the table as well. Let's move straight on to an exam question because it's going to be the easiest place to see what we're up against. Here we've got a pretty standard exam question to do with frequency tables and polygons. You'll note that the questions that I've attached just underneath the video, the first one is nearly enough exactly the same as this. It's just had the numbers change, but the actual scenario is the same. So looking down this then, we've got a frequency table. We've got a question about an average, and that's really common with these. And then we've got some space on chart paper to then draw a frequency polygon as well. 3 marks in total. That's pretty standard for these questions. So let's get this method right, and then you can be getting these 3 marks all day long. All right, so let's just work through it. The table shows some information about the heights of 60 children. Now, a couple of things to note about frequency tables. Often they'll be grouped data. So instead of just having one particular height here in this area, we've got everything within a particular group. So 135 is less than height, and height is less than or equal to 145. So anybody whose height fits between those numbers, 135 and 145, and including the 145 because we've got the line underneath it, anybody who's within that group is going to be counted in this section here. This is a great way of saving time recording everybody's individual height because that will take more time, but also it's much more annoying to read all the individual bits of data if you don't need to know all of that. So let's just have a look through this like in an exam, and we'll just get going. So the table shows information about the heights of 60 children. Here it is. Let's find out what they're asking us to do with it. A, find the class interval that contains the median. Okay, let's do just a bit of terminology. Class interval is just saying which group. Interval means the gap, the range. So what is the gap, the range? So which group here is which range of heights is the median person in. And remember, median is the middle number. So if we were to line up these 60 people all in a row in height order from smallest to largest, the middle person, they would be the median height. Now, anytime you've got an even number of values, there's not going to be one person or one value in the middle. There's going to be 2. And we're after what's between those 2. So for example, if I just show you my 4 fingers, if I was to work out what the middle, the median of these 4 fingers are, I would count from the outside in and realize I've got 2 fingers in the middle. There's no finger right in the middle. So I'd have to work out what's between these 2. Now, the easiest way of doing this is say, okay, how many are there in total? So I've got 4 fingers here. I'm going to add 1 to it. So 4 plus 1 is 5, and then half whatever that answer is. So half of 5 is 2.5. And we can see I'm looking for my 2.5 finger. So 1, 2, and here's the half in between, okay? So add 1 and divide by 2 always works for finding out which is the middle value. So we've got a question which is out of 60 children. So let's just use that data then. So we've got 60, and I'm going to add 1 to that. So 60 add 1 and divide that number by 2. Okay, so 60 add 1 is 61. Divide that number by 2 and I get the number 30.5. So I'm after the 30.5 person. Now obviously there's no person that matches 30.5. So we're probably looking for a group that contains both the 30th and the 31st person in height order. So if we were imagining that line of people, we're looking for who's the 30th and the 31st person and what group are they in. Okay, so to work out what group they are in, what we're going to do is we're looking at our frequency table here, and what we're going to do is work out the cumulative frequency. Now cumulative just means we're adding it on as we're going. Yeah, as you accumulate things, you're increasing what you had before by what you've got now that's extra. So I'm just going to add a column here and call it CF for cumulative frequency. And I'm just going to start adding these numbers going down. And as I'm going down, I'm keeping an eye out for where have I crossed the line for 30 and 31. Okay, so first of all, 9 add nothing is 9. And then I'm going to add the next one to it. So 9 add 15. And 9 add 15 is going to give us 24. Okay, 24 plus, I haven't gone over the 30 and 31st person yet, so I'm going to go to the next person. So 24 plus 11 is going to give me 35. So I can now see that I've already gone beyond the 30th and the 31st person. So if in this group it only went up to 24, then the 30th and 31st person must be in this group here. Because we've gone up to 35 people and it started at over 24 people. So 30 and 31 both feature in that group. So I know that this is going to be my class interval. So I'm going to just put that down as 155 is less than H and is less than or equal to 165. And this is just the group that contains the 30th and 31st person because they are the middle people, okay? And what's in between them is the median. All right, so that's part A for our single mark. I could finish this cumulative frequency table just by adding the last row. So 35 add 25 should come up to our total of 60. So whatever we get to the bottom, it should always add up to how many there were in the question. Okay, part 1 done. Let's move on. B, draw a frequency polygon for the information in the table. And we've got our chart paper to do that. Okay, a couple of things. Polygon just means many sides. Okay, so it's going to be some kind of shape with many sides. Now, a couple of errors that people make. They think it's got to be a closed shape, so all the lines have to be connected at the end. I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. That's not the case. Now, a couple of things you'll need to do for this. The first is you need to find the middle value of each of the groups. That's normally going to be a fairly straightforward process. They normally make it nice and easy, either 5s or 10s, something like that. So between 135 and 145, what's my middle value going to be? Well, I can see, I'm just going to make another column. I'm going to put it over here and I'm going to call it the middle column. Okay, so midpoint. And the middle between 135 and 145 is 140. Okay, the way I could work that out if it was a bit more complex is I could count the gap. So there's 10 between these and half the gap, so 5. So and then I can just add that on to the lower number. So if the gap is 10 in total, half of the gap is 5, and I'm just adding 5 onto 135. Okay, we've got the same gap on the next one, 145 to 155. Gap is 10, so I'm just going to add 5 onto 145, and I can see that the midpoint here is going to be 150. Now, they do try and sometimes trick you out by having a different range in one of them, by having a wider range in one of them. So it's always worth checking, is the gap the same in all of them? So 155 to 165, yeah, still gap of 10, half of that's 5, so it's going to be 160 is going to be in the middle between those two. And the last one, 165 to 175, still a gap of 10, so halfway is going to be 5 more than 165, so it's going to be 170. And these are my midpoint values. Now, the reason I want to know that is that it's the midpoint that we're going to use to actually draw our polygon. So if we now have a little look down at, I'm just going to, at the table, we can see we are going to be plotting these values, this table, as a polygon onto this chart. Now, what I'm going to do is use the midpoint and the frequency. Okay, so the midpoint is going to be my height. Okay, and the frequency is going to be the frequency that we've actually just already got here. So I'm just going to take a pen, and my first one, my midpoint is 140 and my frequency is 9. So 140 I'm going to go up to 9, okay, which is just here. Okay, next one. 150, I'm going to go up to 15. So 150, going up to 15. Just making that point there. 160, I'm going up to 11. So 160, I'm going up to 11, just making a little mark. And 170, I'm going up to 25. So 170, going all the way up here to 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like so. And now I've got these dots, which I'm going to use to actually draw and connect them. So because it's called a polygon, it means I've actually got to have sides to it. It's got to have lines. So I'm going to, with a ruler, I would do this, not freehand like I'm doing right now. Join these dots up and you'll end up with a polygon because it's got many sides to it. 1, 2, 3 sides here. Okay, so we've got 4 data points that we've plotted. And they are based on the midpoint that we worked out, so what's in the middle of the group, and the frequency that's in the table. And that's it. That's all the marks for this question. So nothing more to it. I'll bring along the first exam question that I've set you alongside of this if you want to compare your numbers to this one. But that's the end of the lesson. So hopefully you found that helpful, and I will check in with you next time. See you later.